Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. Today I'm greatly honoured to be joined by Stein. Scott is better known as the leadership pathfinder. He enables smart leaders to achieve more in less time. He provides leadership hacks, a smart strategy to boost your impact and result. He's a 4-time author, including a book called Leadership Hacks, which we're going to talk about today, an international speaker, and he's worked with thousands of leaders around the world, helping them to become better by fast-tracking their thinking and their approach with people. So without any further ado, Scott, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to the audience, give a little bit of your rich background and what led you to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. Wow, what a great intro. It's great when I actually get some of those intros. It makes me a little bit humble at the same time. My background, actually, I grew up in America. So anybody here in Australia would probably pick up that accent. I grew up in the Midwest, kind of an interesting, normal, typical upbringing. However, my background, my great-grandmother was a Cherokee medicine woman. It's kind of interesting because she married a white man. She broke the bloodline and she was banished from the tribe, which is unfortunate because it would have been great to learn some of those skills, but they actually weren't passed on. I was fortunate as I got a little bit older, went to uni, and I actually went and studied with somebody in the Apache tradition. And I thought it was Native American survival because I used to be an adventure guide, but actually what I was actually being taught was the Native American philosophy. So quite a bit of that actually gets threaded through everything that I do. Of course, I've got the formal, education with a master's degree and a thesis on teams, and I taught at a university as well. But so, yeah, it's kind of an interesting background.
Well, I need to know more. So tell me, how would you describe a Native American philosophy?
Yeah, well, again, it's very similar to a lot of Native people around the world. And one of the things that, always comes back to me, Stalking Wolf was the Apache elder that taught Tom, the person that really trained me and the Native American side. And one of the things that he said about the white man or the Western world is many people were what he called walking coffins of flesh, which is kind of a strange thing to actually hear. But what he said is a lot of times, a lot of people in the Western world get so busy doing things that they forget the reason why they're doing them. And they forget what's real. They forget their family. They forget what's important to them. And they actually get lost along the way. And I see that quite often with a lot of the executives I work with. They're overloaded, they're overworked, and they actually have quite often have lost touch with what they should be doing.
And tell me how has that impacted the way that you see the world?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I've got the Western background and the Western education side. So it's almost bringing some of this native wisdom with some of the modern strategy of how do you kind of live in both worlds. It was interesting when I was trained, I had a really big desire to just go to the bush and live off the land and be really simple. And one of the challenges is, well, you've got to live in the real world at the same time. It's how do you kind of live your passion, but actually walk a path that makes sure that you're living up to what you should be doing.
So tell me more about how you do that then. So how did Scott Stein achieve that balance?
Yeah, and let me tell you, I'm not perfect, right? I'm still learning, I think, as we all are. But I think, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I actually started studying what do people do so they can get a lot of things done at work, but still have time for themselves, still have time for their family. And I guess what I started doing is I did a lot of training and a lot of coaching, and I would pick up different tips from pretty amazing people. Some CEOs, some CFOs, maybe from a country or from around the world. And I started learning these little shortcuts and strategies they would use. Because let's be realistic, like we live in a Western world, we got to make money, we got to have a salary and income. But at the same time, we want to live our lives in the way we want to live it. So I actually kind of learned what are these shortcuts that you can use from a work and a business perspective so you can still live the life you want to have at the same time. And that's kind of why I actually wrote the book, Leadership Hacks.
Yeah, wonderful. We'll come back to some of those hacks shortly and some of those tips that you've learned along the way. I want to come back to this term walking coffin. And what I was hearing was even back then, we talk about it a lot now, but even back then, the evidence that it's important to have purpose. Tell me what is Scott Stein's purpose?
Yeah, great question, and I think sometimes it can change over time. But for me, it's always how do I kind of inspire individual and collective, what I call connectedness. So how do I actually make sure when I'm doing something, I'm connecting with the people that I'm doing it with? And how do I get them to connect with what they feel lights them up and what their purpose is at the same time as well?
Yeah, really good. And it looked like you saw the same thing I saw about this walking coffin being an absence of purpose or a pursuit of purpose, but the purpose not being evident. Tell me about what you take away from this kind of walking coffin.
There's something that Native people around the world teach, and it's called your inner vision. It's almost like your intuition. And I think if I look back through my life, there were moments in time where my head said, I got to do this because that's what's expected of me, right? But my intuition said, no, this is what I should be doing. And I think quite often we don't listen to that intuition enough. Again, the Native American people or Native people around the world, they call it their inner vision. It's kind of that guiding voice that lets you know what you should be doing. And sometimes we only look to see what's directly in front of us. And we don't listen to that inner vision or that intuition because, I can't see it. It's not there. But quite often that intuition is letting us know a lot of things we can't see, but we actually have to do some things to move in that direction.
There's some really interesting things popping into my head as you speak, and I'd love to test them with you. So the first one is I'm hearing an incongruence between extrinsic expectation and intrinsic drive. And then I'm thinking of the word authenticity and whether we're showing up in the way that we expect other people want us to, or whether we're showing up as our authentic self. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, I think part of it is how we're showing up. And I also think part of it is, are we doing the things that we love doing? Or are we just going through the motions because we want to have a job? One of the interesting things, I just got back from America. I was doing some work over there. And one of the interesting things, that's hit the media is this quiet quitting, where people are going, I'm just going through the bare motions because I'm not engaged. I'm not learning and full of life at work. And I look at that and I actually feel a bit sad for people. Because I'm going, well, if you're really not enjoying what you're doing and you spend most of your waking life doing it, why wouldn't you have the courage to actually stop and do something that you should be doing? And I guess that's where I'm looking at right now, what's going on. And quite often, again, people have mortgages, they have bills to pay and everything else, and they can get stuck in some of these things. But at the same time, if they listen to that intuition, they'd probably be doing the things they know they should be doing.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty scary, Scott. So depending on whether you read ATD research or Gallup, it's 16 to 20% people are fully engaged in the workspace. 16 to 20, 1 in 5. And then there's a bunch of people in the no man's land of kind of mailing it in, if you want, doing the bare minimum to make sure that they don't get fired. And then there's a percentage of people who are actively disengaged. They're working against the system and working against, like, almost rebellious in what they're doing. So it's definitely right.
Yeah.
How much of it do you think is this balance between societal expectation and internal drive again?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. But the other piece that I see that's almost missing, that's as important, is leadership. Because when people are at work, what the leaders do, that can actually get them to light up, even if it's a task they didn't think they want to do. And I've had this happen. I've had jobs in the past where, the job was neither here nor there. And I knew I wasn't going to be doing it for the rest of my life. But my boss, the manager, the leader I had, the way they worked with me, they lit me up. And actually, I was completely fulfilled while I was doing that role. Now, I knew I wouldn't be doing it forever. But they created the environment that allowed me to stretch, allowed me to grow and shine, and actually get that sense of engagement. And I think that's the piece that's missing right now. And it doesn't matter what sector you're in. I do a lot of work, of course, in the private sector. I do work in public service. I do work in government. I do work in military. And it doesn't matter where you're at. This leadership gap If we don't have people stepping up to create that environment and encourage those people to step up to the next level, that's why we're getting this high level of disengagement. Everybody's so busy chasing something, but they're actually not going, well, what do we really need to be focusing on? And that's a real issue for a lot of leaders right now.
Yeah, I'm hearing, I think it's pretty much three powerful things there, Scott. First of all, that the leader is responsible for that environment where people are spending up to 1/3 of their lives. So that responsibility should be taken seriously. That secondly, you spoke about people doing things because they want to do it. That's really the role of the leader. It's not to tell people what to do. It's to inspire people in a way where they do it because they want to do it. And the full definition is inspiring people into a meaningful cause or meaningful action against a worthy cause. And then third part is then creating that environment where they do find purpose, where they do find meaning.
You know, it's interesting. I was just thinking, I had a very busy day yesterday. I had, a couple of presentations during the day, and then I had one in the evening for the Master Builders Association. And I'm based in Sydney. And it was great. I was talking and giving my presentation, and then somebody made a comment about the apprentices. Right? And they go, they just don't have the work ethic. We just had somebody, he only was with us for 3 months and he just quit. It just didn't come back. Really, it was really interesting because the energy and the dynamic it was all the apprentice fault. It's all this younger generation, Gen Z. They just don't know what it's like to work. And as we started talking about it, I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, when they first started with you, tell me about their motivation. Right? Did they want to be there? Were they excited to be there and everything else? And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. They wanted to learn. They were excited for the apprenticeship and everything else. And then I said, so what did you do to them over the next 2 to 3 months? Because they started engaged, they started motivated, but you as a leader didn't do something to maintain it. Why not? And it was a really kind of a confronting question, especially because I was in a group of 100 people. But as we actually kind of mapped it out, they realized, you know what? I've been pointing a lot of the finger at them, and actually, I haven't changed my leadership approach. I'm leading, in fact, he said, I'm leading the same way that the leaders that I had 30 years ago led me, right? And he realized, he's going, really, he hadn't changed much. And I'm going, well, actually, a lot of things have changed, including the value set of people. The younger generation don't want to actually work or follow a leader that they can't trust, that isn't inspiring and isn't growing or stretching them to the next level. So, yeah, really interesting dynamics right now with the different generations.
Yeah, two really key things there, Scott. First of all, in defense of many leaders around, not all of them are getting a good education about what it really means to be a leader in a modern and changing world. So the tendency is to mimic the behaviour of those before us. And that's a very hit and miss affair. Sometimes you've been lucky and you've had an inspirational leader and you can mimic some good behaviours. For most of us, it's not the case, and the stats tell us it's the other way around. And then the other one is that millennials and Gen Z, I'm going to say how I see it, is they're a misunderstood generation. They're not accusations that they're privileged and they want everything handed to them on a platter. No, the things that they want to have purpose and meaning. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want their opinions to be valued. They want to be guided. They want to be successful.
I agree. I think the younger generation are probably one of the most self-actualized generation. So what that means is if they're not actually doing something that lights them up, they're not going to stay, right? They just won't, and that's kind of tricky for a lot of employers right now. We've got record lows out of employment. We've got, shortage of staff, and then we've got people that start and then they don't stay. And it really means we've got to really take a look at what do we need to do differently? How do we mobilize these people and engage them in a different way? And different than what we did even 5 to 10 years ago.
Now, here's the challenge for everyone listening. Have a listen to the things that Scott is saying. So this is very true. And you see the Great Resignation in the US at the moment is an example of this. So you've got all of these people out there that are looking for purpose and meaning. They're looking to be seen. They're looking to be heard. They want to feel like they matter. And they're going into these jobs, and if they don't find that, if they don't find that there is a worthy cause, if they don't find there is clarity in the purpose, the meaning, the values and beliefs, if they don't feel like they're contributing and that they matter, they will very quickly pack up and move elsewhere looking for it. So my call to action to everyone here is, if you want to be a organisation, to be like a formidable organisation that everyone else is admiring in the future, here's your opportunity to step into the breach and to be clear about your purpose and values, to be clear about your values, your beliefs, your purpose, your meaning, all of these things. And you will attract people that believe in the things that you believe, and then they'll work for you with loyalty, with respect, and they'll put their heart and soul in it. So in that void that we're seeing, there's an opportunity there, right, Scott?
Oh, it's a massive opportunity, and it's also a competitive advantage. You know, I had somebody earlier in the week go, just wait until the economy changes, right? Everything is in cycles. Everything's been booming for so long here in Australia. I remember when somebody said I came out in the 80s and I had to fight for a job and I had to move back home. And I said, yeah, that's true. But that's not the cycle we're in, right? We're in a different cycle. And now is the time to build that foundation. So when the cycle changes, you're actually in a prime position in your market to actually go to the next level. And I think that's the opportunity for a lot of leaders right now.
It's really interesting, this lesson that you're getting from Native Americans here that has led us down to this clarity around purpose and what leaders can do. That sounds like a leadership hack right there, but I want to get into the book now. So what inspired you to write the book in the first place?
Yeah, it actually came about because what would happen is I would work with an incredible leader, you know, and they were able to get a lot more things done in less time than anybody else. Right. And what I did is I started unpacking what's the process that they were using. Right. And essentially it became a hack. A hack is a shortcut, something that a lot of people may not know, but it allows you to get more things done in less time. And what would happen is I would, gain all of these ideas over the years, and I would be delivering a session with a client, and I'd share one of the hacks or a model for it. And eventually, one of my clients said, can you just write a book of it? Right? You've got so many of these good ideas that you've gathered from all these different organizations and leaders, and they're practical and they work. Can you just please write a book? Right? And that's actually how it came about.
So here we are. And now we have it. That's wonderful. I'll share something with you. I put in my book a concept called an amalgam leader, but it looks like you've taken that to a new level. So I'll describe what the amalgam leader is. What I do is I document the attributes of the different leaders that I've had in the past, the ones that were great and inspired me. And there's no such thing as one perfect leader. I would pick what was it specifically about them that I really enjoyed. And then at the other end, I'd write a document of, let's call it the less inspiring managers that I've had, the horrible bosses I've had in the past, and what was it that they did? What was it that they made me feel so I'd never forget it? And my amalgam leader is like a mixture of all of the strengths of my favourite leaders and a bunch of lessons of things I'll never do. It sounds like you've taken that concept, but you're going down to specific things that to do as opposed to attributes.
That's it. Spot on, Mick. What I found from a lot of the leaders I worked with, they said, give us the practical ideas. Right? They said, everybody knows what a great boss is. Everybody knows what a boss from hell is. They said, we all get that. They said, give me some practical things that I can implement with myself or my people so I can move in that direction of that great, productive, inspirational leader, right? And that's what I think a lot of people are looking for. They don't, or they're tired of what I call the rah-rah stuff. The rah-rah stuff is people get, and I was just in America, and it was all hyped up and it was all energetic, and you go through that and you walk away and you go, okay, that was great and it felt great, but what do I do? How do I change the way I behave? When I've got that discussion with that person tomorrow that's a bit challenging, how am I going to do it? And I guess that's where the leadership hacks come in. They give you a bit of a playbook. It's a bit of a resource of what you can do to try and actually connect with people faster and allow you to get better results with them in less time.
Yeah. Well, just as a side note, one of the things that I find in many great speeches is a lack of a call to action. And it sounds like your book is just a a complete library or Bible of calls to action. So getting to, but what can I really do about it? So that's really cool.
It's more of a resource book of how do I do that, right? Rather than an inspirational book of why would I do it.
All right, so I think you know what question I'm about to ask you. Which one's your favourite?
Oh, that's a big question, mate. That's like asking me which of my 3 kids are my favourite. That's not very fair, right? Because they all are, right? You know, the thing that I look at is it really depends on where people are. You know, so I actually even wrote the book, so you don't have to grab the book and read it from the beginning to the end, you know, because that's great 10 years ago, but people don't have time for that now. They can just grab any section and actually use it, you know, and one of the more useful hacks, right? And that's what I look at. What's a really useful thing for people to use is the delegation hack, right? And the reason why that's probably, I do a lot of conference speaking and keynotes on it, is most leaders, if you ask them, you know, if you could wave a magic wand and get anything or have more of anything, what would you have? And almost all of them say time, right? I'm too busy. I don't have enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. And quite often I go, all right, so if you found a way to delegate some of these tasks, you'd have more time to focus on what's important. Right. And everybody goes, oh, yeah. And I go, so if you can find another half an hour a day, what would you do with that time? Right. And quite often, one of the best hacks is what I call the delegation hack, which is how do you actually delegate in a way to get people to do what you need them to do?
Well, that's true, is that we're all human beings. We're only afforded 24 hours every day. Doesn't matter who you are. You're only going to get 24 hours. So the way to maximize your impact is to inspire those around you and to get them activated and motivated, etc. And delegation's an element of that. So tell me about your preferred model of delegation.
So if you think about it, you know, everybody knows they need to delegate. The problem or the challenge is they don't. So for those of you that are listening, if you think back to, there might have been something that you should have delegated to somebody else, but you didn't. And when I kind of did my research, there's 3 reasons why we don't delegate. The number 1 reason is time. Because I go, by the time I taught you how to do it, Mick, I could have done it myself, which actually is completely true if it's a one-off. However, if that's something that should be done ongoing moving forward, well, investing the time now means that I'm not going to have to invest the time in the future. So that's the number 1 reason why people don't delegate. The second one is they just don't trust their people. Because they said, well, I tried to delegate before. You know, I've asked Mick to do something, but he just didn't do it in the time frame I wanted, or he didn't do it at the quality I need. So, you know, he's a pretty face, but he's not quite as good as I thought he was. That's a common one. And the third reason, the real reason, is they just don't know how to. So in the delegation hack, there's 4 levels of delegation. So 4 different ways that you can delegate. And the problem is most people are only aware of 2. So here's what most people do. And if you think back to your career, when you first became a manager, like I remember when I first became a manager of people or a supervisor of people, I was excited. You know, I wanted to be a great boss. I wanted to make sure that I delegated. I didn't do everything. And I did what most leaders do, which is level 4 delegation. Level 4 delegation is where I say, Mick, I need this project done. Can you do it? Yeah, great. All right, go to it. I'll just check the results. And for any new supervisor or manager, they do that and they go, you know what? This delegation stuff's easy. You just ask people to do stuff and they say they'll do it. Now, the problem is when you start doing it, you give back to me what you're working on. And I look at it and I go, that's not how I would do it. You're missing a couple things. And what I found in my research for the book, people give their staff 2 opportunities to prove their capability. So I've delegated once with you. You didn't quite do it. I might let you off the hook. I'll delegate something else to you. And same thing happens. I go from level 4 all the way down to what I call level 1. Level 1 is, you know what? Don't worry about it because I'm going to do it. Right? And this is the common pattern that most leaders fall into. They stop delegating because they go, I can't trust my reputation on Mick's inability to get things done or get it done in the time frame or the way I need it. And then what happens if they have a team? There's some staff that they can delegate at level 4 and it works, but the other ones I can't, and then I overload the other staff. And now I've got this imbalance of the team because some people aren't pulling their weight, others are pulling more of their weight, and that actually can throw a lot of things out of balance. So in the book, I talk about level 2. Level 2, and the language is really specific. Level 2 is let's map it together. What that means is instead of me telling you, Mick, this is what you need to do, write this down, I start with an ask. All right, Mick, here's a task. I've got some ideas on how to do it, but I want to see how you would go about it. And what I do is I visually capture your ideas, either onto a sheet of paper, or if I'm on a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom call, I'm actually going to put it on the electronic whiteboard. And the reason why that's important, I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with somebody about what they're going to do, and we just talked about it and we walked away and they weren't really clear on what you were talking about. When you map it out, people can see it. So we map it together. I might ask you, all right, maybe there's 6 steps that you're going to take to get this task done. I might ask you, all right, Mick, what do you think you need to do first? And you say, all right, this one. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to write number 1 next to that task. And then I go, what do you want to do next? And you go, oh, maybe this one. I go, well, you could do that one. But if you do this one next, it's going to save you some time. So you can actually even coach them in this process. So I might number all of those steps 1 to 6. Now they actually have not just what they're going to do, but the actions and the sequence they're going to take to get that task done. And because I've actually worked with them on it and it's their ideas, you've actually got a lot more engagement. They've bought into what needs to happen rather than what most people do is they kind of micromanage and tell people what to do. So that's level 2. There's also a little check-in along the way. So I'm going to check in and make sure that you're on track and show me what you're doing. And I'm going to delegate it from there. All right, that's level 2. My recommendation, if you map that on a sheet of paper, take a photo of it so you've got a copy of what you've agreed to, but give them the physical piece of paper as a form of ownership. Right? Or if it's on a digital whiteboard, make sure that they've got a copy of that image. So they've got that as their plan. And what I find, once we get to level 2, the dynamics in the relationship start to change. Most of the staff that I've done this with over the years, they appreciate the fact that rather than me micromanaging them, I'm asking them for their idea. I'm getting some of that engagement. That's level 2. Level 3 is very similar, but there's a little tweak. And this I actually discovered when I had my first company in Australia. It was an outdoor team building business. This is in the 1990s, when outdoor team building was the rage. And we had developed a relationship with a resort to do some of the outdoor team building there. But part of the process is one of their staff started working for us. And her name was Claire. And Claire was incredible. Like, she would get her mind to something and she would go 1,000,000 miles a minute. The challenge for Claire is she never had a good strategy. So she was missing out on opportunities. And so what I did is I started meeting with her every couple of weeks, and we would map out all of her projects for the next 2 weeks at level 2. And she loved it. I was working with her. It's visual. She knew exactly what to do. It was her strategy, not mine. And what I did to get her to level 3, because level 3 is you map what you think you should be doing on one page. Show me, because there might be something that I forgot to share with you, and then you action it. And that's what I did. She came down to Sydney because she was up in Terrigal. And I said, I just got this client meeting. This phone call, can you kind of actually just start mapping what your plan is on each of those tasks for the next week or 2? And she goes, oh, you mean make a little mind map, a little diagram like what we normally do? I said, yeah, just map it, 1 page, and then show me. I'll give you a couple ideas and you can run with it. And that's how you transition from level 2 to level 3. What I find, the minute you get people to level 3, they actually step up even more into a role of leadership. Because now they're going, well, you want me to think for myself. And a lot of times that's what a lot of staff want. As we talked about in the beginning, make me find a way to be engaged. Find a way to stretch me and let me feel like I'm actually important because I'm actually doing some things. That's what level 3 does. And of course, the goal is to get people to level 4, where you can delegate at the high level, but you know the process you're using, you've got the trust, and they can just run with it.
Yeah, I really like it, Scott, and I want to unpack it a little bit here, some things that I'm hearing. First of all, that it's very adaptive. And the thought that you go from 0 to 4 in one go without any kind of steps along the way is probably where some of the folly comes, right? So you go straight from micromanagement to 0 and just letting people just go for it, and they'll feel lost in that situation. So having the adaptive leadership skills to understand under which circumstances am I going to use level 1, level 2, level 3, or indeed eventually level 4. I love the questions that you started with questions, even at level 2, it wasn't here's what needs to be done. It was what do you think needs to be done? And in that case, you were holding the pen. And then at level 3, they were holding the pen. And there's a huge power that comes, the empowerment that comes when they are holding the pen. And then, of course, you're right about the fact that there's many conversations in history where 2 people have walked away from the same meeting going, yeah, I fully agree. And you walk away with a completely different understanding of what was just said. But when you have the power of that map or someone summarising it with that clarity, I think is quite marvellous. The one thing I didn't hear there, Scott, and maybe it was just under the water level there, why the person is doing it, right? So it's not just what they're doing, but why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve and why? And what makes it important? What makes it significant? What positive impact comes from achieving this? What about that element?
Yeah, I think that's at the very beginning. And that's giving people what I call context. Here's a task, need you to do it. Here's the reason why. Here's what it's going to do for us. Any questions on that? No? Great. Let's go into how to do that. So you want to give them context. Without that context, they kind of don't know. But at the same time, a lot of people's job descriptions that they give employees are crap. Because they list all these responsibilities and people go, I don't really know what that means. And I'm not sure what percentage of time I should be spending on that versus this, right? And I think the level 2, when you give them the context, it gives them a little bit of that framework and that flexibility at the same time.
If we get into job descriptions, you'll end up with me on a soapbox about how poor job descriptions are at the moment. I really don't think that job descriptions capture the true superpowers that the individual has. It always ends up as a mismatch of some description, and they end up kind of in a swim lane and told to get back in their swim lane.
But there's a good point here, mate, because one of the great uses of the delegation model is in your recruitment and selection process. I cannot tell you how many times somebody goes, I got a problem with this person. I hired them. They've got 5 to 7 years of experience. So I thought that they knew all of this. They've been in the role for like a month and they don't have any of the skills I thought they had. Right? One of the best things, and this is a hack on the hack, a hack you can use on the delegation hack, is use it in your recruitment selection process. So, for example, Mick, I see that you've done this kind of project and this kind of project. Just curious, and I'll give you a little bit of time to do this. Can you do me a favor? I want you to map out what were the steps you used in the process, what was the sequence you used, and what were a couple of the challenges along the way. Now, rather than putting you on the spot right now, I'm going to go make a cuppa. I want you to map it on one page and then show it to me. What would you like me to make you from a cuppa perspective? The reason why is so many people in the interviews, they trump up their experience, but they don't have the capabilities to project manage and map out things. And I can't tell you how often I've used this and had clients use it. And I said, this person had 5 years of experience, had all this great resume. But when we asked them to actually map out at a high level what they had done previously on some of the projects, they couldn't do it. And I said, well, if they can't do it in the interview, should you be hiring them at that level for that position? So it's actually a great strategy you can use to bring in the right people and actually get them up to speed even faster.
Nice technique, Scott. I used to use a practical exercise when I was employing technical writers. I'd set them down and rather than look at their resume, okay, here is a poorly written document. Go ahead and fix it for me. And if they bring back gobbledygook, then they're not the right person. And if they nail it, they are the right person. When I interviewed my video editor that edits all of our videos, Faris, he edits this podcast too, by the way, so he's going to be listening to this going, oh, they're talking about me. The reason why he got the job is he had a practical assignment to edit a video and he nailed it. It was amazing, right? So those practical skills are great. And you've just got me thinking that I've used it with 2 practical exercises, but you're using it in a kind of mind mapping. Here's a blank sheet of paper. Show me your thought process. I really love it.
Yeah. Very powerful, right? And practical. That's the important thing. And I think, Mick, you've even given examples of practical things people can use. And that's what a lot of leaders are looking for. Give me some practical. Give me something I can get my hands on and actually apply to help me get better results.
When you start that job search, of course, you write a job description and you write a description of the person that you think you're looking for, right? And then you go out and you look for the candidate that is the best fit for what you're looking for, but they're not going to be the perfect fit. They're going to be the best fit, and they're going to be an overlap. They're going to have some things that they can do that you never asked for, and they're going to have some things that they're not quite there. My view is the day that they start the job, rip up that job description that you use for the selection process and write a new one based on their true strengths and weaknesses. And then have a look at your team mix again and go, all right, do we still have the right team mix here, or do we need one more, or are we good to go now? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good strategy. And in fact, in the book, in the second chapter, I talk about what I call role mapping, which is a really common activity. So quite often what I'll do with people, and this is a good thing for leaders right now, most people are so busy doing what they're doing, they're not really aware, am I being productive and effective or not? I'm going through the motions, I'm busy and everything else. So what I get them to do, again, it's a little mind mapping activity. I get them to think back of the past week and create a mind map of all the activity, which is usually all of their responsibilities, right? So I get them to just map it all out. Right? Then what I do is I actually get them to allocate what percentage of time are they spending on each of those areas. Right? And this is what a lot of job descriptions don't have. How much time should I be spending here? How much time should I be spending there? And then, of course, if they're a leader, that's a bit of a struggle because they're not consciously aware. The next layer I have them put on it is working in the business or on the business using Gerber's model, right? In the business, day-to-day reactive firefighting versus on the business, developing their people, looking at strategy, looking at trends, and I have them put that layer on it. And pretty quickly they identify, or I can identify with them, there's a lot of inefficiency. So then we look at, all right, ideally, what would you be doing? And they create a new map. Now, some of the areas of responsibility might stay the same, but what I see that changes is that percentage of time, that focus of where they need to be. Now, the reason why I bring this up is a great strategy you can use from a recruitment and selection around job description is the same thing, right? So here's the job. I've mapped out the responsibilities of the job and the percentage of time, right? And I've broken those responsibilities into specific skill sets. So when I bring somebody on, I actually go, all right, here's what it is. And I actually start going, what's your current level of capability in this skill on a scale of 1 out of 10 right now? And quite often they'll go, oh, I think it's pretty good in the interview. It's always a 9 out of 10. And I'll go, great. Show me how you would do this. And they go, I'm not really sure what you mean. I'm going, okay. All right, so you say you know how to do this, but when I ask you to demonstrate what that involves, you're not sure. So can we rescore you? Because I don't know if you're really a 9 out of 10, because if you knew how to do it, you'd actually be able to map it for me. So what this does is it allows them to go, well, I'm really good at this, they can map it. And quite often you can do the role map and you've got these areas that they're really good at it and they can demonstrate it. And then, like you said, there's other parts of the roles that they haven't developed yet. But what I can do if I'm the leader now, I can go, well, this role and the salary with the role needs somebody to do those skills. So my responsibility as your leader is to now train and develop you in those skills so you have that capability, right? And this is kind of a way to kind of bridge that gap.
I do like the practicality of it, Scott. I just want to challenge and say, what about aptitude and attitude at that point? So a great way to test if the base skills are there. How would you go about testing the aptitude and attitude at that point?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because I honestly believe you can't really test that ahead of time. People will tell you what they want you to hear. You can do psychometric testing, which I do as well. Right, DISC, you can do Myers-Briggs, you can do 360-degree leadership impact, LSI. That's great. It's a snapshot. But I'm going, within our group and our culture, are they going to actually demonstrate those values, yes or no? And really, the only way to know if they're going to do that is either A, find somebody that's worked with them ahead of time so they can actually share with you what they've observed, or B, once they're in the role, you can actually see, are they actually living up to that attitude? Are they actually demonstrating what we believe that they put across in the interview or not?
I think another key there is also clarity. So being clear about the values and beliefs of the team. I spoke before about clarity of purpose and meaning, but it's also important to have clarity around the values and beliefs of the team. So as they start, or even before they accept the job, be really clear about the values and beliefs of the team. And if they see themselves in that environment, that's a good sign. But at least then you've set the scene. They don't come in blind, right? So, yeah.
Correct. And it's also, what does the leader do at the very beginning? So what that means is we've got these values and beliefs and everything else about the way we operate here. And I need to help coach and guide you of where those boundaries are, of the way we treat each other, the way we communicate with each other. And from a leader's perspective, if they notice somebody going what I call off the reservation, which is going above and beyond, they need to let them know straight away. Too often, leaders are too busy. They don't do that. Somebody's left to go. They're there for 3 months, 6 months. That's now a pattern that's set. And part of it is because the leader actually didn't let them know, whoa, wait a minute. We must not have communicated this really well. This is how we do things around here.
And I was talking to a good friend, Michael Panninger, about this just yesterday or day before, that conversations like that do not age well. So you're better off getting in there early and often and celebrating and rewarding the behaviour that you do want and making it clear about which behaviour you're not going to tolerate. Yeah.
Correct. People will only change or adapt based on one or two reasons. They will move away from discomfort or toward pleasure. And that's part of the role of the leader, right? Part of the role of the leader is ideally it's about towards pleasure, making it positive, enthusiastic. But there's times, and I got to be honest, there's times in my career where somebody had to have a very firm heart to heart, which was really uncomfortable for me, but they did it in a completely supportive way, right? And that was so powerful because of the discomfort. I was going far out. They're doing this, but the way they're doing it, I respect. In fact, it motivated me to want to live up to the value sets that I know I should have been living up to.
Yeah, brilliant. I want to come back to delegation again now, because we covered quite well the third reason why people don't delegate, which is they don't know how. And you've given a wonderful model that the leaders out there can start thinking about. If you don't know how to delegate now, think about this 4-level model that Scott's talking about. The first one was they don't have time, which is complete folly, because if you don't have time to delegate, you'll never have time to delegate, because you're just going to be chasing your tail the whole time. Admittedly, you mentioned that unless it's a once-off, right? The second one was about trust. And I want to break that one down a little bit, the mindset around this. One of the ones that I see, and it is an element of trust, but it's also an element of limiting belief, where the leader thinks that they're the only one that can do it, or I'm the one that's best placed to do it, or whatever the case may be. Tell us about how you address that belief.
Yeah, essentially what that means, really, if you go to the basic core and the psychology of it, that means they're a control freak. And I got to be honest, there's been times when I've been a control freak. I'm sure you have as well, Mick. But it's actually building the awareness to go, well, yeah, I can do it better than anybody else. I can be the most efficient at it. However, my role as a leader is actually to develop the other people's abilities to do the same. Right? So that's one thing, building that awareness. The other thing for the left brain leaders out there, or the left brain people, is look at it through a commercial lens. So the task that you can do really well is great. And we could be paying somebody $50,000 a year to do that task. But because you're so good at it, we're paying you $250,000 a year to do the task a $50,000 a year person should be doing. Tell me how that's commercially smart. So for me, for a lot of people, that's one of the ways I get them to break the pattern. Because I'm going, if you're really a leader and you're really working on the business and you're being commercially smart, you would actually go, you know what? Yes, it is a good good ego stroke that I'm in control and I can do it better than everybody else. But realistically, that's not commercially smart. And we need to have the depth, and I need to engage my people. And that's one way I can do it. I can actually develop their expertise by getting them involved and delegating that to them.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that commercial angle. I hadn't thought of that for a while, but it's dead right. You end up with a highly paid person doing something that a lower paid person could be doing. Haven't thought of that for a while.
I see that everywhere. When I get people to do their activity maps, so what activity you've been doing the last week, I'm going, really? You're doing that? Yeah. Why? Oh, it's just easy and quick for me to do.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Now that I think of it, I'm sure there's still ones that I'm guilty of in that regard. I was a control freak at one point. I learnt my lesson the hard way back in 2009, 2012 period. I learnt my lesson the hard way, and I become the limiting factor in the business. I was the one that was stopping the business from scaling because I was the one that wanted to do everything, right? So I've absolutely had that lived experience. How I got over it were two words in terms of mindset shift. One was scale and the other one was opportunity. So I realized that every time that I was the one that I thought, I'm the best person to do this activity, that if I always was the person, then we only have one person in the business that can do it. We can never grow. We can never scale. And the second one was the word opportunity. Every time I do it, I'm robbing someone else of an opportunity for their growth. So a classic one for me, Scott, is I pride myself on my public speaking, and I love it. I love public speaking. And for a long time in my career, if a conference came up and we needed a speaker, I was jumping straight in there. I didn't almost no care of who was around me. I'm going to do it. And then as my career went on, I realized that every time I did that, as a competent, confident, I think exceptional public speaker, I was preventing someone else from developing their craft as a speaker. And then once I made that mindset shift, I made it really easy for me to go, hey, would you like to give this conference presentation next week? How does that sit with you?
Yeah, that requires a higher level of awareness and a higher level of acceptance. A lot of people in their head, they get that. They know they should be doing that, right? The trick is they're not sure how to. And so what does that mean? They keep falling back into that pattern. And more than likely for you, something happened as a trigger that got you to go, you know what? I can't stay in this pattern anymore. It's not going to work. And that's usually what happens. You know, you get the pain or the pleasure. Hopefully it's the pleasure, but sometimes it's the pain that gets you to go, bugger, right? I had to learn it through the school of hard knocks, which is a pretty powerful teacher.
All right. So I think we've covered well this great hack around delegation, and thank you so much for your insights on that. We're stumbling around this thing that you're talking about, measuring where people's time going, and that made me want to ask you about your leadership hacks around distractions.
Yeah. You know, distractions, they're kind of a fact of life. but what I know and what I actually researched and put in the book, there's really two different types of distractions. There's internal and external. Right? Internal distractions are the ones we actually can control. These are the ones such as, I know that if I eat some KFC, I love KFC, but I know if I eat it, my energy is going to be a bit low and globby for the next day or two. So that's a really good example of, well, that's something I control. That's something that internally, if I make better choices and better decisions, I can actually reduce my sense of not being able to focus and get a lot of things done. Right? So that's an example of an internal distraction. Another one, I had this with one of my clients. They've got an office in the city, and some of their staff were in the part of the floor of the building that doesn't get any natural light. And of course, it's underneath an air conditioning duct. So the staff there were freezing. I don't know if you've ever worked in an office where you're absolutely, like, they had to put winter jumpers on, like, because they were so cold. And, you know, where they had other people on the other side of the building, they were always in the sunshine and they were warm and they were complaining. So they would try and turn the air conditioning up, and the other people were trying to turn it down. I'm going, why don't you just switch the peoples in the desks? So part of that is making sure you create an environment that allows you to actually focus and get more things done rather than being distracted. And I think that's a really important piece, especially right now with a lot of people, working in a hybrid way where they're working from home, right? Not just in the office. They got to find a way to limit those internal distractions.
Yeah, really good. I like this one about the internal distractions. What's your position on multitasking?
There's a lot of debate raging. Can you multitask? You can't multitask. I think it depends on the individual, right? And for me, it's not a fact of, getting the task done. It's about energy and momentum. So what I find for some people, if they try and sit down for a big period of time and focus on one thing for a block of 3 hours, they're really good at it. It's easy for them to operate that, and mentally they're wired for that. Other people, they're hopeless. To sit down for a block of 3 hours and concentrate on one thing, that's not what gives them the momentum, or it doesn't energize them. What might energize them is they might start something for a while and then they'll actually jump to something else, and that will springboard something else. And they might even come back to what they originally started on, but they've got some fresh energy. They've been recharged and they've actually looked at things differently. So I think it really depends on the individual.
Yeah. I can see your point on the individual nature. For me, it was trial and error, and I worked out. In fact, I got to the bottom of it when I was writing my book. For me, it's 90 minutes. For me, multitasking doesn't work. I'm not good at it. And 90 minutes was my sweet spot, that after 90 minutes, the quality of my work and my brain fog would increase. And all it takes is get up, go for a walk for 10 minutes, or it could be just go get another cup of coffee or something like that. And then I can go again for another 90 minutes. So for me, it was 90 minutes, but that came through trial and error of measuring what worked and what didn't work. And then the other one that really helps me is intentionality, is that when I sit down, the first thing I'm assessing is, what is my intention here? What am I trying to achieve? And that fast tracks my, what do you call it when you ramp up time? That fast tracks my ramp up time when I start into that activity. Yeah.
There's another great strategy that people can use as well, and I talk about it in the book as well. And it's being aware of your natural energy cycle. Some of the people that are listening in are early morning people, which means they get all of their energy first thing in the morning and they're firing on all cylinders. Other people, it doesn't happen until about middle morning. Some people are middle of the day. Some people are early afternoon. Some people, they got that energy peak in the afternoon. I had a staff member named Drew. Amazing. Could get a lot of things done. He was absolutely hopeless before 10 a.m. Wasn't how his energy worked. I'm an early morning person, so I wanted to have staff meetings at 8 because that suited me. And he would always come in late, or if he did come in, he wasn't firing on all cylinders. So essentially I said, mate, you're an afternoon person. I don't want you coming in before 11 in the morning.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you, because I know that doesn't work. Like he would waste those 2 to 3 hours every day anyway.
Yeah.
Where's your energy rhythm? And a good strategy on this, and this helps with distractions, if you have something that's challenging or tricky, something that you got to get your head around and really think and buckle down on, do it when your energy is at its peak. See, the problem that a lot of people do, like for me, I'm a morning person, I got to get all these things done, and I procrastinate something, right? I'll do it this afternoon. By the time the afternoon comes, I just don't feel like it, right? And what happens? I come up with 101 excuses of why I'm not going to do it, and I'll just do it tomorrow. Of course, what happens tomorrow? The same thing. So one great strategy is focus and do it when your energy is at its peak. You will find it'll be quicker. It'll be clearer to find the options and solutions you need, and it's actually going to save you some time.
Yeah. I think you and I are similar here. I start at 4 a.m. every day. It's just natural for me. And I'm at my most creative from about 4:30. That's when I get into my creative streak. So when you look at my schedule, you'll see me doing all of my creative, my product development, my books, all of those kind of things in the morning, coaching, because I want to give my clients my full attention. And you'll see me answering emails and responding to social media comments in the afternoon, where it doesn't take as much capacity, and I just go through the afternoon doing that. Yeah, brilliant, sir. All right, that leads us to another one that I know that you've spoken about in Leadership Hacks. This common question is people want to know what's the best productivity tools I can use. What do you use? OneNote? Do you use Evernote? Do you use this? Do you use that, etc.? What are your hacks around communication and technology?
Yeah, I think you got to use whatever works. And this is the thing, when I first wrote Leadership Hacks, the first version was back in 2018. So I was talking about Slack and all of that because that was new at the time. And what I've found is, now people have even moved beyond that. Probably one of the most common things that a lot of corporates are using right now is Microsoft Teams and the chat function. So rather than doing the emails and all the other apps and everything else are going, we can just use the same platform to actually reach out to somebody else, have our team meetings, especially with people moving to hybrid, with some people in the office, some people at home. Right. So they're actually starting to actually use some of those other strategies in some of the other apps. I think some of the apps like Evernote that you can actually take photos of, you can tag it, you can actually search it. I think that works quite well as well. For me personally, what I quite often do, if there's something that I'm interested in, I'll actually just email it to myself. The reason why, even if it's a photo, I just share it that way, because I find on Gmail, the search capability on Gmail is incredible. Right? I can do a search and it brings up anything and I can find it straight away. So I think it really depends on what do you want to use that kind of works for you.
A little bit around how your own individual brain works as well. I see some people go to great lengths around organising their email into folders and all this kind of stuff. I wouldn't be able to find things if I did it that way. I do it by remembering, oh yeah, that conversation was on the 4th of August, and I'll go back to the 4th of August and find it that way, or search for it in that way, that kind of stuff. So I'm more temporal than I am subject, if that makes sense.
That's why I say it kind of depends on the person. Like I worked with one very senior exec. She oversaw Asia Pacific for one of the financial institutions. And I talk about her on email hacks. She was great at clearing her inbox. She used a 4-step process, which is brilliant. Because I said, Bridge, I want to watch you. So I spent some time just watching how she did it. And what she does, and it's a great hack, 4-step hack on how do you clear your inbox. The first thing she did is scan. She never clicked on anything or read anything, right? She would just scan her inbox, quickly followed by step 2, which is delete. So she would go from 100 emails to 50 emails in less than 5 minutes. And I remember going, like, you're kind of ruthless at this. She goes, well, 2 things. A, most of it is junk. I don't need to do it. I don't need to action it. It doesn't mean anything anyways. And B, if I accidentally delete something that is important, I can guarantee if it's important, somebody's going to send me another email within 24 hours that I'm going to have to act. Right. And it was kind of really interesting on how she used that. Then the third step that she would use is sort. And she did use different folders for different countries and country managers. Worked for her. And then, of course, the 4th step is respond. Right. And again, I reckon for a lot of people, they just let their email inbox go on and on and on. Then they can never find anything. I reckon one of the best strategies is just do that scan, do that delete, and reduce some of those so you don't have to worry about all that clutter that's in your inbox at the same time.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great technique. And once again, if it works for you. So work out what one works for you. Yeah, wonderful, Scott. It's been a great conversation. I want to give you one more go at, I'm sure that there's at least one more leadership hack that I haven't gone into today. We've spoken a lot about delegation. We've spoken about distraction. We've spoken about technology, but what's one more leadership hack you'd like to leave with our audience before we go into our rapid round?
Yeah, I think one of the big things, and this is what I put in the updated Leadership Hacks book, I put a 4th section in it, and it's all on hybrid hacks. Because one of the challenge I'm finding with most leaders is, how do I lead when I've got some people working remote and some people in the office? In fact, how do we come up with a policy that makes it work with everybody? And I think just a couple of ideas around that are practical that I think leaders can use. Because when we're all in the office, it's easy. And I got to be honest, when everybody was on Zoom or Teams, it was easy because they were all kind of in the same platform. But when it's kind of mixed, that's when it's a little bit messy. And we've got a lot of different expectations for people. So one of the things, if you're thinking about going to hybrid, there's 2 different approaches. Be aware of your approach. One is, are you taking a fixed approach or a flexible approach? So Apple, again, a pretty amazing company, very, very great on their staff. Even Tim Cook stuffed this up as CEO. They took a fixed approach, right? They said, we've decided you're only going to work, 2 days remotely, and these other 2 days are going to do it. Because it was fixed, they dictated to their staff when they had to do it. And of course, what happened? They had a riot. Internally, people were upset. It was leaked to the media, and they had to kind of go, oh, maybe we need to relook at this. So I reckon the other approach that's better is being a flexible approach. Flexible approach is let me go to my department heads of whatever departments and have them work with their people to go, all right, based on the outcomes we need to deliver, what's the best way to do that? And what can be done remotely? And what can be done here when we get that collaborative team environment and we get that spark of innovation based on sharing that time together and letting them come up with it to develop that framework. And I think that's a really important one right now because people are still trying to figure out how do I navigate this and make it work and still be productive at the same time.
There's three really powerful things there, Scott. First of all, the flexibility. I love that. So that's great. Second one is we're coming back to listening to our people again. They're going to have opinions and they want to feel like their opinion matters. So ask them and listen, and they're going to have ideas. The closer they are to the pointy end of the business, the more likely they've got a really great idea about how it could be done. And then the third one, I think you're alluding to there, is emerging properties. I'm going to refer back to a conversation I had with Lee Prosenjak, who's also been on our show before, and a good friend, and we adore him. And one of the things that he did when he's a facilitator, and in the world where it almost instantly became a Zoom world for him, he and his team, instead of asking, how can we do what we do over Zoom, as in how can we replicate what we can do over Zoom, they asked, what can we do over Zoom that we couldn't possibly do in an in-person environment? So they looked for what are the emerging properties that might even be better, rather than trying to shoehorn an old method into a new approach. They thought, what is the new? What are your thoughts on that?
Quite often, necessity creates an opportunity for us to operate differently and think differently and try new things. Kind of what the pandemic did. It forced people to go, what's another way to do this? A lot of different ways to do it. There's not just one way. And also, let's try it and let's tweak it. And I think we don't do that enough. So often leaders get set in their ways and they're afraid of failing. They're afraid, oh, maybe it won't work. It won't be perfect. Where I think we've got to actually kind of go the other direction.
Yeah. Instead of saying, oh, asynchronous work doesn't work, you say, what emerges when we try asynchronous work? What benefit could be drawn from asynchronous work? And can we blend asynchronous work with synchronous work for a better result? And that's one example. And now I remember one of the examples Lee gave. So in the Zoom environment, he invented this thing. What did he call it? A comment storm. And what it was is, those meetings where everyone's brainstorming and everyone's in the room and they're all sharing their opinions, and the extroverts tend to dominate the conversation and the introverts are sitting there with great ideas but just not feeling quite included, not feeling comfortable. So he invented this thing called a comment storm, where if there was a particular topic where you wanted people's tell me what's really on your mind without the infection of other people's ideas in the room, and you'd get people to type an answer to a question in the comments, and then you'd go, right, 3, 2, 1, submit. And boom, the answers would go into a word cloud, and that would be a pure answer, not invaded by the other people. It's that same thing. What emerging properties are here that we wouldn't have been able to do if we weren't working in a hybrid or a work from home environment?
The pandemic forced us just to look differently. Look at what else can we do.
All right. So thank you, Scott. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. That takes us to our final round, and we ask the same 4 questions to all of our guests. The first one is, what's the one thing that you know now, Scott, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I kind of knew it, but probably just reinforcing it. Trust your intuition.
Very good. And what's your favourite book? And first of all, the rule is you can't pick one of your own 4 books.
Favorite book? It's funny for me, different books have different meanings at different times in my life. And I think about one that's popping in my head right now, and it's kind of an out there one for a lot of people, is The Celestine Prophecy, which had some really interesting things. But the reason why I like it is because of the story. The story, of course, there was some meaning behind it, but it was actually the story. And in my life at that time, it was quite a powerful experience on that story. And of course, it mirrors about listening to your intuition at the same time.
Final question is, I'm sure that there's going to be people in the audience that would love to know more about these leadership hacks and about you, Scott. How do people get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way is just jump on my website. Go to www.scottstein, which is STEIN.com. Again, there's free downloads there, including a little mini delegation hack download. You can find out more about the book, other resources, as well as some of the other things that I do to help more people get more things done in less time.
Brilliant, sir. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show. I learnt a lot, and I know our audience would as well. We wish you the best of luck with the books as they continue to sell and continue to have the impact that you have on leaders around the world with your leadership hacks. Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.